Hello and welcome to episode 55 of Hitting the Bar, the football podcast. I'm Chris Karle.
And I'm Geoff Saunders.
So, Geoff, before we analyse and dissect what happened in the first round of games in the Premier League, your trivia question.
Okay, it's quite difficult to express this as a question, but at the end of the season, you look at the league table, and you have the played, won, drawn, lost, goals for, goals against, and points. Millwall in 1973 and 74 had their end of league table was, if not unique, certainly incredibly rare. Why was that?
All right, that's intriguing. So we'll find out what Millwall's final statistics, won, lost, played, all those kind of things in a row, what that meant. So finally, after 7 weeks of break from the Premier League, we had kick-off this last weekend. We watched most of the games, and first game of the season was Fulham 0, Arsenal 3. I don't think I was surprised with that. I don't think I really saw anything from Arsenal that made me fear them particularly. What was your impression?
Well, I mean, exactly how bad were Fulham? And we're probably not going to know that until we've worked out how good Arsenal were. It was, as you say, it was entirely predictable, although I would have gone for 2-0 to Arsenal. But it's very difficult to know what that match means, if anything at all. I certainly don't agree with the narrative in the press at the moment. They seem to be building Arteta up to be something fantastic, and the Arsenal team to be something brilliant, but I still don't see it. And that's why you play 38 games to find out, isn't it?
Well, yes, I tend to agree. I mean, I'm a Tottenham fan, so I suppose, and you're a West Ham fan, so to a similar extent. I don't buy into this thing that how well Arteta's done and what a great improvement on Emery he was. Although, of course, yes, they won 2 cups, one of them being a shield. And they did beat Fulham, who were playing like a championship team, I thought. They didn't look good. And Arsenal took full advantage, and well done to them. Of course, quite pathetically, all the Arsenal fans on Facebook, we are top of the league, we are top of the league. 1 game down. Not really much for me to say about Arsenal. I think it was an expected win. They took full advantage of Fulham being very poor, and I think they're going to struggle this season. Yeah,
it's going to be a very long season for Fulham. And last week when you asked the question, I tipped them to go down along with West Brom and Aston Villa, and certainly there was nothing we saw the other day that suggested they'll do anything at all in the league.
Well, there's another team who may be tipped to go down. Let's skip a few games and go to one of the late games straight away. West Ham beaten at home 2-0 by Newcastle. At frightening times for West Ham because they did not look good either. You talk about Fulham not looking good. I was a bit amazed at how bad West Ham were.
If you put the players from both teams side by side and said who are the best, there isn't a player in the Newcastle team that would get into the West Ham team. Therefore, the problem's got to be the manager. But West Ham had no energy. They were second to every single ball. They didn't create anything. It really was a case of they're not playing for the manager. Now, you also have to go and look at the selection. They paid 40 million for Sebastian Haller last season. Now, Haller's got a goal to game record of 1 goal every 2 games, which meant that West Ham underpaid for him. He's worth much more than 40 million. But Haller has always been one of 2 attackers. He's never been a sole central attacker, and that's exactly how Moyes was playing him. So he played him in a position that he doesn't play, said, oh, well, he's not very good, and then doesn't pick him. It's extraordinary. So I think the issue is David Moyes rather than the players at West Ham, but equally, the players have got to play. Well, they look like the Wanderers did for half of last season, 11 players who'd never met. They meet in the car park, have a beer in the pub, meet in the car park, and go and see what you can do on the pitch, like a Sunday League team. So, they were playing like a Sunday League team who'd all been on the booze the night before, and had no energy and no spark or creativity. But that's not fair. The one exception to that was Souček, the Czech that we had on loan for most of, or half of last season. He looks the real deal, and he was really putting an effort in, but he was almost alone.
Yes, Souček, the Czech who you finally signed a cheque for, because he was on loan last season, but you have signed him now. I mean, I watched that game, and I thought West Ham, as you say, were sluggish, and they didn't seem to know what they were doing. I think we're going to be looking quite a bit at managers and their effect on their players in this round of games, because we'll get to it in a bit, but Mourinho also and Bielsa at Leeds, you can feel the effect of the managers negatively and positively. But Newcastle, do you think that, because they didn't look too bad, they were up for it?
They look quite good. They'll finish if you had to pin me to a number, I'd say they'll finish 14th.
Okay, fair enough. So Newcastle to finish 14th, you heard it here first. Do you think West Ham could possibly finish lower than that then?
Well, if they carry on playing like they played in that match, they'll be relegated. I mean, it was hapless and hopeless. But the players are much better than that. So either Moyes has got to get his finger out and get them playing, or West Ham have got to get a new manager, because that was it was unacceptable, really.
So you say that West Ham should get a new manager if it carries on like that, or do you think they should get a new manager now? And who should it be?
They should get a new manager now, and Eddie Howe.
Ooh, I thought you were going to say Pochettino or something, but obviously he wouldn't take that job, with all due respect. Eddie Howe, despite taking Bournemouth down, what's your thinking behind that?
He likes his teams to play football the right way, attacking football, and defence is a kind of a little bit of an add-on. I mean, that's West Ham football, isn't it? You've got to score more than the opposition, and I think Eddie Howe will be a great manager for West Ham. The only other one I can think of who a Premier League team must take very, very soon is Gareth Ainsworth, who's taken Wycombe Wanderers up to the Championship from being almost out of business. He's a great manager too, and his team, the players love him and they play for him. So someone like that. But Moyes was never the answer. I cannot understand why they made him permanent, and it's going to end badly. But Howe or Ainsworth?
You definitely probably do need a change of manager to play the West Ham way, as you say. However, the West Ham way that I've watched recently has been running around like headless chickens. Well, when I say running around, not actually running around, obviously, but I'm strolling around, because it did look pretty bad. But Newcastle, very much like Arsenal, took full advantage of the failings at West Ham, I thought. There is a rumour of a new signing from Burnley that's protracted and going on, and a new rumour today is Rob Holding on loan. Give us your insights into both those.
I suspect they're connected in the way that Sullivan and Gold have got a long track record of leaking to the press that they're after this big player and then failing to get them and saying, we couldn't agree personal terms, which is newspaper speak for the player wanted too much money. And I think they wanted Holding all along, and I really don't understand why. I mean, Holding, if a player is so conspicuously not good enough for the Wanderers, then West Ham shouldn't be buying him either. I don't rate Holding as a defender. Tarkowski is an excellent defender and should be in the England squad, and 30 million for him is a steal, and West Ham should pay it. But I don't believe that Gold and Sullivan ever had any intention of buying him. So
you think it's just something to placate the fans? Because personal terms means how much he's going to get paid. It doesn't mean use of the comfy chair on a Tuesday, does it? So obviously that's a smokescreen for not signing anybody, and you wouldn't be happy with Rob Holding. So we don't think the future is that bright for West Ham at the moment. Unfortunately. Another team that surprised us, I think, a little bit at the weekend. There were a couple of teams that surprised us. But I think we predicted Southampton to beat Crystal Palace because they were very bad in the last 10 games of last season. They didn't win a game in the last 10 last season, and yet the only goal of the game scored by Wilfried Zaha, who just before the game his manager Hodgson said he was surprised nobody bid for. Crystal Palace 1, Southampton 0. What did you make of Palace? Because actually I thought they actually looked a lot better than they had done.
Yeah, they look quite good. They've always been solid in defence with a very good tackling midfield that helped to protect the defence. Their problem has been scoring goals, and usually when Zaha plays they look a lot better, and that was the case last weekend. He took his goal extremely well. The way he took that volley, it's a very difficult volley to make, and most players put it over the bar. Took it very well, and Palace looked quite good. So I would think Palace will be closer to the relegation positions than they were this season, simply because you've got to score goals over 38 games, and you can't rely. Zaha has never been a 25 goal a year player, and apart from him you still struggle to see where the goals will come from.
And of course that was Palace beating Southampton, who we've spoken at length about having last season lost 9-0 at home to Leicester City, and then the manager staying on, and then they improved greatly, and how he's got them ticking. I mean, they only lost 1-0, but what do you reckon to Southampton and their manager?
Well, the manager's proved that over in two clubs that he's a very, very good manager. His record at RB Leipzig was exceptional. He took them into the Bundesliga, had a very good first season in the Bundesliga. Second season he dropped down to 6th place, and they decided to replace him with Nagelsmann, which you can't argue with. Nagelsmann's a genius. But the interesting thing after that 9-0, when obviously Hasenhüttl was sitting there contemplating his navel, he got a telephone call from Sir Alex Ferguson, who said, look, don't worry about it. It happens to us all. Just keep doing what you're doing. You're doing the right things. So, despite what you may read in the newspapers and despite what you see from the nonsense written by fans below the line, football's a very small family and they all know each other. And by and large, they all like each other. So I thought that was excellent from Ferguson. Nothing to do with Manchester United. Decent guy, and he kept Hasenhüttl's head up.
Yeah, I mean, that's first impression would be that's very professional of him. But on the other hand, yeah, they all know each other. It is a small world, as you say. I mean, I noticed that with, we'll come to in a bit, Tottenham against Everton, Ancelotti and Mourinho, quite clearly good friends with a lot of respect for each other. So that's Crystal Palace against Southampton. But the big game, the most ridiculous game, was the champions of the Premier League against the champions of the Championship, obviously promoted Leeds. Were away at Liverpool. We all thought it would be a baptism of fire for Leeds, but in fact it was quite a ridiculous game in many ways. Just what you want to see, though. 4-3 to Liverpool, very late on, Liverpool getting the winner, but I thought Leeds looked incredible, Geoff. I mean, they were a joy to watch. They were playing very fast, attacking, free-flowing football.
Well, that's the thing. I think that anyone who's seen any Bielsa side knows what you're going to get. You're going to get that level of energy, that commitment. They will run further and faster than the opposition. They'll create space. The only relevant question was, could they do that? Could they take that from the Championship into the Premier League? And well, we found out, yeah, they can. And I thought Leeds was superb. They were equal to Liverpool in most areas. They had more possession, more touches, more passes, and they made more tackles. But here's the difference. Liverpool created more chances. Liverpool created 22 chances to Leeds 6. And that was the difference in the match. And that's what Bielsa focused on in his interviews after the match. Yeah, okay, it was entertaining and you will have enjoyed it. But, it's the sort of match coaches hate, to be quite honest. Coaches want control. They don't want 4-3 matches. Yeah,
it was quite chaotic. It was 3-2 at half-time. Mo Salah scored 2 penalties and got himself a hat-trick. The last penalty coming on 88 minutes being the winner of the game. Penalties to Liverpool at Anfield, not a surprise.
No, you can't actually do a wry smile on the radio. But who would have thought that Liverpool would get penalties at Anfield when they need them? I mean, it's obviously never happened before, as we know. I think they were both penalties, though, to be quite honest. But Mo Salah, 76 goals in 109 Premier League games. That's quite something, isn't it? He's not even a striker. I mean, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, I think people forget that actually, technically, he's not a striker, no, and that is an incredible return per game. Yes, a hat-trick for Mo Salah, 4-3 to Liverpool against Leeds. I mean, I was watching it, and one of the commentators or journalists afterwards said exactly what I was thinking. That it was almost crazy, this Bielsa way of playing. That they didn't care who they were playing against. They were swarming forwards in droves, leaving massive great gaps for Liverpool to nip round behind, and they didn't seem to care. And Bielsa did say before the game that we play our way. It doesn't matter who we're playing, and you could tell that they had absolutely no fear of Liverpool at all.
Yeah, well, if anyone can take their memory back to World Cups, to that wonderful Chile side that I just wish they'd been able to convert all their chances and win the World Cup, because they was just wonderful. And that was Bielsa football. It's just like this madness happening in front of you. There is a pattern, and the pattern's in his head. And he is a genius, which is why he has disciples like Guardiola and Pochettino and all the rest of them. It's going to be an awful lot of fun watching Leeds this season.
Because of the sort of history and the way you're, conditioned, we have joked on the radio show we do for 93.6 Global Radio every Saturday. We've joked that, oh no, we don't want Leeds coming up, dirty Leeds and all that, will be boring. And actually, my feeling towards Leeds changed instantly during that match. And I think, first of all, Bielsa is a refreshing change to the Premier League. He's going to be very interesting in interviews. But if Leeds carry on playing like that, I'm going to enjoy watching them. Apart from when they beat Tottenham, of course, which, if they play like that, they inevitably will.
Yeah, they put almost every other side in the league to the sword playing that way. What was a bit disappointing for me, again, reading the fans' comments below the line, people having a go at Bielsa. And, whenever he does something well, there's always people who try and find some sort sort of dark reason for it, or like the so-called Spygate thing. He did something that he didn't know wasn't done in England, and because it was his idea to do it, instead of the club paying the 200,000 fine, he paid it himself. And that's the type of man he is. And for all those who, and there are people which you can read in the newspaper going on about him sitting on this bucket. And the reason he sits on the bucket is he has a very serious back condition, which means that's the angle he must sit at. Otherwise, it puts it. Yeah, because if you look at that bucket, it's a little bit higher and it's got a cushion on top of it. It's made to be exactly the right height for him to sit on to protect his back.
Actually, I did not know that. I thought it gave him the perfect view of the pitch that he needed. Because you hear some great stories about him. He is a maverick. He is very different. Lives above a chip shop or something near Leeds, and apparently he walks to work or gets a bus, and Leeds fans of course can't wait to help him, stop and offer him a lift to the ground, and goes, no, you're all right, I'll walk.
Yeah, and because he didn't know the way, he got someone from the Leeds groundsman department with one of the machines where they mark the lines out to put blue paint between the door of where he lived to the training ground, so that he could walk along and follow that. So if anyone was in the Leeds area and they noticed this line of blue paint going along, that's what it's for. So Bielsa can find a way from his flat to the training ground. Yeah,
he's a character. We're going to enjoy him and his team because they were brilliant against Liverpool. As you say, for managers, that sort of chaos is not a wanted thing. It's not desirable. But for fans, it was brilliant. For a neutral, that was a great opening day for fans to watch a game like that. 4-3 to Liverpool in the end. But they did expose Liverpool a little bit. They did expose their weaknesses.
How many times has somebody scored 3 goals against Liverpool at Anfield? That says it all, doesn't it?
And as Martin, our Leeds United supporting friend, did point out, they actually scored 5 but had 2 disallowed. So I suppose you could say they had 5 in the back of the net at Anfield. A very rare event. The next couple of games I want to have a look at: West Brom against Leicester and then Tottenham against Everton. But let's start with West Brom, another promoted team who will be in trouble I think this season, and Leicester, who I've got a weak spot for. I do like Leicester. It's good to see a team that aren't money bags up there in the top 6. And they had a bit of a torrid time towards the end of last season, and having been in the top 4 for all that time, ended up 5th. And I was a bit disappointed for them in a way. But they got off to winning ways, didn't they?
Yeah, they did. It's going to be a long season for West Brom as well, I think. And you can imagine that they'll sort the defence out and the defensive part of the midfield. But again, who's going to score the goals that are going to keep them up? And that's going to be the problem they have. Leicester, well, they won 4 of their last 17 matches last season. Now, why was that the case? Injuries. They have very, very little depth, and only Deitch at Burnley and Nuno Espirito Santo at Wolves made fewer substitutions last season. Last season's major signing was Ayoz Perez, who didn't really deliver on what he'd done at Newcastle before that. The big problem was the injuries to Ricardo Pereira, the right back, who's superb, and Wilfred Ndidi. And the reason for the fall-off for Leicester was quite simply that they only got Pereira, Maddison, Yuri Tielemans and Ndidi on the pitch together half a dozen times last season. Now, if you can't get your best 5 players on the pitch more than that, you're going to struggle, especially when you have a squad of the standard of Leicester. It's not deep, and they don't have the reserves to come in, and they've lost Chilwell. The replacement they bought, Castagna, who played for Atalanta and looked very, very good in the Champions League for Atalanta last season, came and scored the goal the other day. He looks a really, really seriously good buy.
Yeah, I mean, Leicester won away 3-0 at West Brom, and I think 3 was about right, although 2 of them were penalties, both scored by Jamie Vardy, off to a flying start again. 2 penalties, but both deserved. And as you say, Castagna got the first goal. It was 0-0 at half-time. But Leicester looking good, and West Brom, going to struggle a little bit. Possibly one of our contenders to go down. I'm afraid we've got to face it. I've got to face it. Tottenham 0, Everton 1. I suppose I could make the excuse that Lo Celso, who's probably the only playmaker in that squad at the moment, was out. Harry Winks, I thought, was dreadful. I know a lot of Tottenham fans don't think he's up for the task. And I am going to give credit. Somebody on a football forum on Facebook, Glory Glory Tottenham Hotspur, one of the people on there, said that even if Harry Winks was facing an open goal with the ball at his feet, he would pass it back to his own defence. It wasn't just him, though, was it, Geoff?
No, it was very like the West Ham performance. There was no energy, and you can't actually see energy, but you can see players clearly not putting that extra bit of effort in to make the tackle, to win the ball, to turn and go forwards and pass the ball forwards. And Winks is just like, well, he's just a recreation of Wilshere, isn't he? Any excuse to make a backward pass, and always turns the wrong way. Comes up against the defender on the halfway line. You can turn and go forwards, or you can turn and go back and lay the ball off. He will always turn and lay the ball off going backwards. He should not be playing for a team with the ambition of Tottenham. Definitely, it was energy. There was no creativity. It was just a it was flat. Yeah, that's right. It wasn't that it was a very bad performance. It just wasn't anything at all. And Everton were more ambitious in the way they played. They won every ball in midfield, and they weren't as good as the newspaper reports have been saying afterwards. But to be fair, they didn't need to be.
No, I mean, you're right. There was no energy level there. It's not that Tottenham played badly. I don't think they played badly. They just didn't play enough. That desire wasn't there. It's the first game of the season. You'd think they'd be up for it. Now, of course, Mourinho, like many managers, I know you're not... Well, when I say not a fan of, you're sort of whatever an anti-fan is, of Mourinho, and he came up with the usual excuses. We haven't had time to train together. The lads, a lot of the lads were away on international duty, etc. I did notice quite a few managers saying exactly the same thing, so it is the same for everybody. But there just wasn't that desire or push. I'm not sure if you can blame the tactics or the lack of training. It did look like some of the players were not quite match fit. But that would be an excuse almost. I just don't think it wasn't that they were bad. It's just that they didn't try hard enough for me. Dele Alli, somebody else I just want to mention, who I think is a very talented and creative player. And sometimes I feel that you get 3 or 4 really good games out of him a season, because I don't think he was up for it either.
Well, having your manager publicly criticise you doesn't help, does it? And Mourinho has started his usual and typical year 3 exit strategy already. It's them, that they should have played better. I prepared them better than this. It's all them. You read the words that Mourinho says, and it's all they weren't very good. They, and you never heard the best managers talking in that way. It's always we win together, we lose together, but not with Mourinho. And yesterday in the newspapers talking about how they didn't press. No Mourinho team has ever pressed in history. He's never taken the time and the effort to have a proper pressing strategy. It takes an awful lot of work. The whole team has to do it together. It has to be a combination of players pressing in certain areas, and they have to work through it time and time again. And the players find it a very boring thing to do, and the coaches, for them, it's a very boring thing to do. But you look at Liverpool and you look at the German sides who excel at it. If you win the ball back, you lose the ball but you win it back near your opponent's penalty area, well, what do you need a defence for? And that's the principle, and no Mourinho team has ever done it. So when he says the things that he said yesterday, basically he's lying. He's just getting his excuses in now because he's expecting the big payoff just before Christmas, as usual.
I hope you're wrong in a way, because it'll be more disruption, and I hope he has got a plan beyond what we saw. As I say, I don't think it's because we were bad particularly. It was almost like a friendly the way they played it, and it was like there wasn't something very, very important at stake.
Yeah, as a manager, when your side goes behind the opposition score, you want your team to go, right, okay, we're not having this, and you want them to fight back. Tottenham's worst period in that match was the 10 minutes after they conceded, and if Everton had really put their foot in and really gone for it, they could have got another goal then, because Tottenham just looked shocked. It was almost like players looking at each other saying, what are we supposed to do? I mean, what do we do now? And they looked, it wasn't that they were bad, they just weren't anything at all.
Yeah, I mean, in fairness, that was one of the things that Mourinho said, was exactly what you just said, that when you score a goal, I wanted my players' heads to go up, and they went down. And they kind of did. They looked around as if they said, well, that's it then. What's the major problem? Because in defence, Eric Dyer wanting to play as a centre-back, I'm not quite sure that he did that very well. But for me, we've got Harry Kane, we've got Son, We've got a couple of new players, a defensive midfielder and a defender who both played, and that's about all you can say, really. They didn't do anything wrong. They didn't do anything spectacular. I mean, the goalkeeper, Pickford, did save Everton a couple of times. Tottenham did have a couple of decent shots, one from Dele Alli, by the way. But for me, that spark is missing. There is, as I say, maybe an Eriksen-sized hole there. I'm not suggesting we get Eriksen back, but something of that ilk. Because had there been an Eriksen on the pitch and we'd had a free kick or a corner, not so much a corner because he could never beat the first man, but if we'd had a free kick or somebody to ping the balls in accurately to Kane and Son, we would have possibly not deservedly, but won that game. Who can they get in?
Well, I'd recommend that Tottenham buy Lo Celso because he's very good, and Steven Bergwijn because he's excellent as well.
Yeah, I mean, Bergwijn should have been on instead of Winks from the very start. He did come on later on at least, and Lo Celso was injured. Not an excuse. You should be able to do it without him, but those two should be starting and maybe things will change. But that started Tottenham 0, Everton 1, and then last night couple of games as well. Let's start with Chelsea against away at Brighton, and the reason I want to start with that one is because when Brighton scored their goal, the Chelsea heads didn't go down. They went up the other end and scored almost immediately afterwards, but it did finish Brighton 1, Chelsea 3. I think a little bit flattering to Chelsea, that.
Yeah, the result flattered Chelsea definitely, and the third goal came because Brighton overcommitted going forward to get the equaliser. I think if you looked at all the stats, a draw would have been a fair result. I think Lampard knows he got out of jail a bit there. He still has a problem. Kepa Arrizabalaga is just not good enough. Jamie Carragher said no team ever won the league with an average goalkeeper. Well, if Arrizabalaga was actually average, Chelsea would be much better. They'd have conceded 20 goals fewer last season. Average is great as far as they're concerned. And Arrizabalaga, the goalkeeper, is the problem. Last season, Chelsea conceded 8.5 shots per match. Only Manchester City at 7.1 were better. So it's not the defence at all. You can forget that. It's the goalkeeper. They allowed 3.2 shots on target per match. Again, only two teams, Liverpool and City, were better than that. Kepa's save percentage, 56.5, was the worst since records began. Not just last season, since records began. And they conceded, in goals from open play, they were 6th in the league. It's the goalkeeper, and it is 100% the goalkeeper. The defence isn't bad and wasn't bad last season. It's just, and that goal that Brighton got last night, I mean, it should never have gone in. It wasn't a fantastic strike. It was a sort of regulation save that a goalkeeper should make, and yet he didn't save it. It went underneath him. He's a huge problem. I'd be amazed if he plays in the next match. I'll be amazed if he plays again.
I mean, I really like the look of Brighton, I have to say. Certain people did, Steve Kenton, our Arsenal fan there in London, who does the podcast with us when he's over in Spain, he tipped Brighton to go down last year. They almost did. There was a time when it looked like they could. I thought they looked very good last night, and I thought they were a joy to watch. As a neutral, they played some really attractive football. And the young lad, Tariq Lamptey, who they signed from Chelsea, Graham Potter said he's fun to watch, isn't he, after the game. But I think a little bit more than that, I think he's a prospect.
I agree with Potter, he's fun to watch, and he could be a prospect. The only issue is you have to look at the end result of his runs. How many times did that end result in a shot? And that's the problem. It's all very well looking exciting and bombing down the wing, but something good has to happen from it. And Brighton's problems last season are going to be the problems again this season. Where do they get the goals from? Up until sort of 15 yards from the Chelsea goal, Brighton were very, very good. But how many shots did they have? And how many shots on target did they have? And where were the goals going to come from? I mean, it was a very bad goalkeeping error that allowed the goal. And after that, well, what was there? Even with Kepa Arrizabalaga coming out and flapping at crosses, they still couldn't score. And that's going to be the issue for Brighton. They look very good. They're incredibly well organised at the back and in central midfield, but they've got to create more and score more.
They're well organised at the back. They won't concede that many, I don't think. Certainly not 3 like they did last night. It was Chelsea after all. But they haven't got that striker. Glenn Murray, their main striker, 36 years old, is now on loan at Watford. They've got to replace him. I think Lamptey, I think he'd be a prospect if he can get the crosses in. I mean, he'd look good in the Tottenham team, because we've had a lot of players who bombed down the wing with no end result. That seems to be something that we've created. But I don't fear for Brighton. I think they'll stay up. They looked like a Premier League team last night. And the last game of this round, because obviously 2 games were cancelled because Man City and Man United were sort of involved in European football and are allowed to start a bit later. The last game that we're going to talk about from this round of games was Sheffield United 0, Wolves 2. 2 teams that kind of competing against each other for the same position last year. Wolves looked a lot better. They looked as streets ahead of Sheffield United for me, certainly in the first half.
I think in the first half, yes. The second half, Sheffield United came back into it. I think they will both be challenging for the same positions this season. Maybe Wolves could make the top 4. They look a very, very good side in my opinion, and that they played very, very well last night. And in Connor Cody, who made his debut for England last week, they've got one of the best centre backs in the country. Connor Cody actually has got something of a record. In the last 2 Premier League seasons, he's played in every minute of every match.
That is amazing. I mean, when he played for England and, as you say, made his debut, a lot of commentators and pundits, and you could actually hear it because there's no fans there, a lot of pundits were saying, listen to that, and he was shouting instructions and encouraging his teammates before kick-off, during the game, and when they came back on for the second half. Possibly a future England captain, I don't know, but he's certainly a very mature attitude trying to G up that England team that, he'd have to use the shotgun to G them up, really, but he did his best to get the England players riled up.
Talking about shotgun, the end of the stat that I just read out, he's in 2 Premier League seasons, he's played every minute of every match, but in 6,420 minutes, he's had no shots. Has not taken a single shot, which even for a central defender is rare. Wow. But bizarrely, he is the holder of a record that his number of goals to shots is 100%. Because in his last 132 matches, including the Europa League, he's had 1 shot and scored 1 goal.
I mean, it is unusual even for a central defender, but he is a very good player and he looks solid. Wolves and Sheffield United, unlike Tottenham and Arsenal, will not have Europa League football this season. That could play, especially with their narrower squads, could play to their advantage. I'm not sure Wolves will make top 4. In whose place will they be then? If they could make top 4, somebody's got to drop out.
Well, it's between Chelsea and Manchester United, isn't it? The answer to that question is if the signings for Chelsea work out, then they've got 3rd. So it's challenging Manchester United for 4th. We shall see, but Wolves look good. The only question mark I have is around the signing of Fabio Silva, this 18-year-old that they paid 40 million odd for from, is it Porto he's come from? £40 million for a player, a young lad, 18 years old, who's only started 9 professional football matches. That's an awful lot of money. But, why did they buy him? Well, you have to look at who his agent is. Jorge Mendes picks up £6 million for this transfer. That's a good business to get into, isn't it? Yeah,
you pick up a lad who's played 9 professional games and make the 6 million for yourself out of it. Yeah, and I'm sure selfless act there by Mendes. All for the glory of Wolves. Right, let's have a look at what's coming up this following week, the second round of games. Everton against West Brom and Leeds against Fulham. So West Brom and Fulham, tough games again. Fulham, of course, played Leeds a couple of times, of course, last season in the Championship. Everton against West Brom, I'm going to say Everton 2, West Brom 0.
Yeah, it looks like 2-0 to Everton, doesn't it? Yeah. Leeds, Fulham 3-0.
I'm going to go for 2-1 for that one. I think Fulham will come out fighting, but Leeds will be far too good for Fulham, yeah. And then finally we get to have a look at Manchester United. Manchester United against Crystal Palace. I think that's a Man United win, and I am looking forward to, be it Man United or not be it Man United, who obviously also not your favourite team, I am looking forward to having a look at Donny van de Beek.
Yeah, he was superb in that Ajax Champions League run, wasn't he? He's a very, very good buy. I mean, you can make a case that, and at the end of the season many people will, that he was the best buy this summer. At the moment, I think Timo Werner and Havertz are ahead, but Van de Beek's a very, very good player. Crystal Palace have a habit of upsetting very big teams away from home. So 2-1 to Manchester United, I think.
All right, well, just to be a bit different, I'll say 2-0. I think Man United, I think we both think Man United will be too strong for Palace. And then Arsenal, West Ham. Not often I say, come on you hammers, but Arsenal, West Ham, I mean, I fear for you in that game. Not just because the way Arsenal play, but because the way you don't.
Yeah, I'm going to give Moyes a little bit of credit, and I'm going to say he's got to be embarrassed by that performance last week, and they can't be as bad again. I'm going to go for a draw.
I do hope so. I'm going to go for 2-1 in that one. That's Arsenal-West Ham. This coming Sunday, Southampton against Tottenham. I mean, Southampton lost narrowly at Palace. We were surprised by that. I don't think Tottenham can come away from that without winning. They've got to win that one. They certainly cannot lose their first 2 opening games. I'm going to go for Southampton 1, Tottenham 2.
I'll go for the opposite, Southampton 2, Tottenham 1.
Then Newcastle against Brighton. That for me's got draw written all over it.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, a draw.
And then what should be a very exciting game, Chelsea against Liverpool. That's at Chelsea. I mean, having watched Liverpool against Leeds, I mean, they could lose that. They could actually potentially lose that game. But again, I think that's another draw, a scoring draw.
Oh, I don't know. The one area of weakness in the Chelsea defence was conceding goals on breakaway, and that's what Liverpool do. So 2-1 to Liverpool.
And then Leicester against Burnley. Should be a good game, that. Leicester against Burnley. I'm tempted to say draw, but I'm going to go 2-1 Leicester.
Yeah, I think that's a sensible choice, which is probably the reason why it won't happen. It should be that, yes.
Next Monday, Aston Villa against Sheffield United and Wolves against Man City. So having got off to a flying start, Wolves, then have a very difficult game. But Aston Villa, Sheffield United, depends what happens with Grealish between now and then, I suppose. But I'm going to go for Villa 0, Sheffield United 1.
Yeah, I think Sheffield United will win. I'm not sure about 1-0, but I think Sheffield United will win, yeah. Wolves, Man City, that could be anything. A 2-2 draw. Yeah,
there will be goals. I mean, I'd like Wolves to win that, or certainly not lose it, but I'm going to go for Wolves 1, Man City 2. Those are the upcoming games, and that's just about all we've got time for. But before that, as tradition has it, the question and answer to your Triv question.
Okay, what was unique about Millwall's performance in the 1973-74 season? And it might help you to write this down as you hear it. So Millwall played 42, won 14, drew 14, lost 14, goals for 51, goals against 51, points 42, same as games played. A symmetrical set of statistics for the results.
For those pedants and stat lovers, that's one for you. Nice and symmetrical. No tidying up needed there. That's lovely. And probably never happened like that before. Very unusual. All right, that's all we've got time for. We'll be back next week. I'm Chris Karle.
And I'm Geoff Saunders.
And that was, until next time, Hitting the Bar, the football podcast.